Hello, I'm Tom Harmon in Washington, D.C., and here's what's coming up tonight on The Big Picture. If you're a CEO of a failed bank that lost a staggering $11 billion on your watch, you probably shouldn't be Secretary of the Treasury, right? Why is Mitt Romney considering a Wall Street crony to be his Treasury Secretary, and what does this say about Romney's view for America? You need to know this. The banksters' blatant fraud in the run-up to the financial crisis hasn't gone unnoticed by one top lawyer in the nation. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who also chairs the president's mortgage fraud task force, filed a civil suit against J.P. Morgan Chase for, quote, widespread fraud in the sale of mortgage-backed securities, end quote. This is the first legal action brought against the banks by this task force. Most of the allegations are actually against failed bank Bear Stearns, which was bought by J.P. Morgan Chase just before the economy went into meltdown in 2008. According to the lawsuit, banksters at Bear Stearns knowingly sold defective loans and mortgage-backed securities and kept their investors in the dark about how crummy these deals were. And just like the banksters at Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns banksters openly bragged to each other about how bad the deals were and how much their customers were getting screwed. And Bear Stearns made big money off the fraud. At the height of the housing bubble between 2003 and 2006, Bear Stearns generated $212 billion in mortgage-backed securities. Unfortunately, all of these securities were, to use a more delicate term than the ones that the banksters themselves used, crap. And when the housing bubble went bust, so too did Bear Stearns, which was then bought by J.P. Morgan Chase, the bank that is now liable for all that fraud. Officials within Schneiderman's office are suggesting that J.P. Morgan Chase is just the first in a long line of banks that could be hit with similar lawsuits. Yes, after going after the banks with lawsuits for their fraud, turns out it's a good thing. But we need to go a step further. Instead of just civil lawsuits, we need criminal prosecutions. Back in 1983, Ronald Reagan deregulated the savings and loan banks, and predictably, the hustlers among them started committing fraud, including apparently one of George W. Bush's brothers. 3 years later, in 1986, the S&L industry collapsed because of that fraud, so Reagan nationalized the banks, screwed their stockholders, fired all their management, and sent about 1,000 banksters to jail. I never thought I'd agree with Reagan on anything, but he was right. The only way to stop these billionaire predators from crashing our economy again is to send some suits to jail. Or you could employ the Mitt Romney strategy and give one of them a job as Treasury Secretary. You know, I'm serious. The Wall Street Journal reports that Romney's list of potential nominees for Treasury Secretary includes this guy, John Thane. So, who is John Thane? Well, John Thane is the former CEO of failed bank Merrill Lynch, which was purchased by Bank of America during the financial collapse for pennies on the dollar. In 2008, Thane's bank lost $11 billion, leaving it unable to operate without outside help. At the same time, Thane lobbied the bank's board of directors to hand him a $10 million bonus for presiding over his bank's ruin, and he got it and he took it. In other words, he's the perfect guy for a Mitt Romney administration. Somebody who disemboweled his own business, laid off the workers, racked up debt, and then walked away scot-free with an extra $10 million in his pocket. It's what Mitt Romney did to businesses taken over by Bain Capital. It's what Thane did at Merrill Lynch, and it's what they both will do to America should Mitt Romney win in November. Now, for his take on this, I want to turn it over to Neal Absury, host of Truth for America and author of Conscientious Equity. Neal, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me.
Does it embarrass you? Great to have you with us, Neal. Does it embarrass you as a Republican that Romney wants to nominate a bailed-out bankster as his Treasury Secretary?
Tom, I mean, there's so much going on in what you just said. But first of all, Mitt Romney is quite far from being elected, so we're not going to know who his Treasury Secretary is going to be for a long time. But we do know who Barack Obama's Treasury Secretary is, and he is one of the most incompetent Treasury Secretaries that we've ever had. I mean, we've spent trillions of dollars on this so-called economic recovery. There's no jobs to be found. There's no recovery to be found. Besides that, he's
4.5 million jobs.
Yeah, besides that, he's a tax chief.
4.5 million jobs, Neal. 4.5 million jobs.
And $5 trillion in debt.
You're not going to lay, Neal, I'm sorry, you're not going to lay the 30 years of Reaganomics and the insane deregulation of our banks in 2000 and then Bush's mismanagement of the economy leading to that great crash. You're not going to lay that on Tim Geithner.
Well, we're going to also lay it on Bill Clinton, who started this whole thing with the mortgage crisis that brought us to this point. But, it's the Clinton doctrine that every American's birthright is to own a home.
This was Phil Graham's idea, actually, if you want to get back to it, to make his wife Wendy happy because she was on the board of Enron and Ken Lay wanted to start speculating in unregulated markets. And so Phil Graham introduced the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. But back to Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney has said that he's considering a failed bankster as a Treasury Secretary. Doesn't this tell us something about Mitt Romney?
But come on, Tom, that's a little bit insincere. I mean, Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary was Rubin, who was a co-chairman of Goldman Sachs.
I'm not here to defend
with the World Bank.
I will not defend Robert Rubin, Neal. I'm asking you about Mitt Romney.
And I think that
Bill Clinton is not running for anything.
This is totally hypothetical. We don't know who it's going to be, but it can't get any worse than Tim Geithner. I mean, look at his record. And you talk about bonuses. How about the $165 billion of bonuses, this lunacy at AIG?
Tim Geithner took none of that. He was at the Fed. He was not a bankster.
He didn't take it, but he overseen. But he was a Treasury Secretary when these bonuses were paid.
Okay. In your opinion, Neal, maybe there's something we agree on here. In the setup, which I believe you heard, I pointed out that Reagan deregulated the S&Ls in '83. The hustlers got into the business, including Neil Bush with Silverado, and they crashed the S&Ls in '86. Reagan sent over 1,000 people to jail. He also took over. He nationalized all the S&Ls. He created the Resolution Trust Corporation, and over a 20-year period reprivatized them. Was Reagan right? Is that what we should be doing right now?
Well, what actually happened to solve the problem was in the George H.W. Bush administration when he said, no new taxes, read my lips, and he raised taxes to bail out and to save the savings and loans. What? So if we want to talk, and community bankers, we need community bankers in this country.
Neal, go back and read the history of the Resolution Trust Corporation. Those banks were taken over by the federal government and then were gradually reprivatized. And as I said, banksters went to jail. Don't you think that right now, here's your opportunity. Take a kick at Tim Geithner. Shouldn't banksters be going to jail?
I'm all for people who break the law and who break the public trust to pay the ultimate price. And if that means they must go to jail, then let them go to jail. But I don't think we can condemn every banker in the world because they're not all part of this. There are people who broke the public trust, send them to jail.
Okay. Neal Absury, thanks a lot for being with us tonight, Neal.
Hey, thanks, Tom.